Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. Well, we're rid of 2020, and that certainly is a good thing. And all the messes that were created and all the bad times we had in 2020, there certainly were some good things in 2020. And one of those was the collection of fantastic conversations I got to have on Kansas City Profiles. And today, as we enter 2021, I thought I'd revisit. Last week, I suggested you bounce around and check out all the things we're at Kansas City Profiles, and you can do that again. But I put together a little six-pack of tremendous stories for you here today, and they come from people of various types. We've got sports anchors, we've got news anchors, we've got presidents, we've got football players. We've kind of got it all today, and there's six little snippets of full conversations that we had with great folks in 2020, and they're interesting stories that they told in the midst of their elaborate stories, their life stories. And we picked some highlights out, and I think you'll enjoy this sort of greatest hits package of stories from 2020. And of course, if you want more of it, as I said, you can check out maybe a favorite one that you had, or just peel through the podcast page and see a personality that you like or a story that seems intriguing to you. But here, just for you, I've made it a little more simple with 6 tales from Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
I'm here with Joe Spiker, owner of Easton Roofing, and boy, we had to negotiate a million things in 2020, but Easton Roofing navigated them all. As 2021 rolls out, what should we expect this coming storm season?
Well, Danny, it'll be the same thing as it is every year. The storms come, and you've got the guys out knocking on doors, offering quote-unquote free inspections. Be wary as a homeowner. If somebody's knocking on your door, they probably need the work, and if they need the work that bad, they may be willing to do something untoward to get it. So if somebody knocks on your door, says they want to give you a free inspection, just tell them have a great day and give us a call. We'll come out for free and give you a good, honest opinion as to whether or not you need to do anything at all with your roof.
And what's the best way to get in touch with Easton Roofing?
You can always find us online at eastonroofing.com or give us a call at 913-257-5426.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters. Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Vision's goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. It's time now to get some great assistance on healthcare with Chad Beisel from no-nonsense-healthcareninja.com. And Chad, even your business's name would indicate that you have a real aggressive way and an important way to go after some health insurance for your clients.
What I've found out in the industry is just a lot of people are really confused. They don't know what plans are good, what their plans offer, how they cover. And so I've just taken the approach of being really educated on what options are available to clients and showing them all the options that are available and making sure they understand them so they can pick and choose what options are good for them.
And one thing that's really important, of course, is access to doctors and hospitals.
Absolutely. That's becoming a big issue for a lot of people. Some of the plans out there are going to restrict those clients to where they can and cannot go. So if you live just outside the Kansas City metro, some of the counties outside, you may not be able to go to some of the hospitals up here in the Kansas City area. So making sure that you have a plan that's got doctors and hospitals and places you want to go is really, really important today.
Learn more by visiting no-nonsense-healthcareninja.com and let Chad help you. Firsthand, I have enjoyed the benefits of the CBD products from Canaway. My back feels better and better these days as a major part of my routine are the pain-relieving salve and the pure gold oil. And recently I had the pleasure of a treatment session using the Canaway CBD in conjunction with the Microlight 830 cold laser. The non-invasive treatment session worked wonders, and I could barely tell I was even being touched. TML830 is the first 3B cold laser to get FDA approval, and in addition, the combination treatment with CBD is patent pending. The new smart laser is the only hands-free cold laser in the world and is used by athletic trainers, chiropractors, MDs, physical therapists, and veterinarians everywhere. You can learn more about all the great benefits from the complete line of Canaway CBD products by contacting my friend Sherry McCants at 515-208-6312. That's 515-208-6312 to get outstanding information about Canaway.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlingscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. Let's start it off with Bob Kendrick, the president of the Negro Leagues Museum. It was supposed to be a really big year for the Negro Leagues Museum, the 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues. Well, that has been pushed to a 101 celebration in 2021. And also, is great timing because Major League Baseball has accredited the Negro Leagues now with being an official major league. Bob Kendrick has a story that sort of is reflective of the Negro Leagues as he grew up in the segregated South, and he tells the tale of growing up in Crawfordville, Georgia.
I tell people all the time, we were poor, and I didn't know we were poor because everybody around you had the same thing we had, nothing. So but when everybody got the same thing you have, you don't really know that you're poor. I didn't realize I was poor until I got to college. I get to Park College, and I see all these kids driving cars, and they got their own apartments and this stuff. And I call my mother and say, hey, wait a minute. Y'all hid this from me. But no, I would not change my humble upbringing for nothing in the world. You know, and my kids get tired of hearing me tell the story of how I grew up in a house until I was probably 10, 11 years old that did not have indoor plumbing. And so when they hear these war stories, you know, they're like, okay, man, we've heard this enough. But they're absolutely true. And what it does, though, it gives you an appreciation for things that maybe others take for granted. Yeah, no, I was excited to get indoor plumbing. And I still appreciate indoor plumbing. And the guys that I play golf with today, they'll tell you, if you see me go to what they call them now, there was an outhouse, but now they're modern day, they porta potties now.
Right.
You won't see me go to a porta potty. If I go to a porta potty, that's breaking news. And they laugh at me now because, you know, we had outhouses as a kid when I grew up. And so
you didn't want any more of that.
I don't want no part of it. They can call it these fancy names. It's still just a modern day outhouse is what it is.
So I read that your dad introduced you to the game of baseball. What was the home life like? You mentioned your brothers. Where were you in the line of siblings? And how many siblings did you have?
Yes, 6. I'm the baby of 6.
Okay.
And the youngest, that's the brother that's next to me is 10 years older than I am. Whoa. So I'm the baby, but it was almost like I was the only child because they were all of age and starting to get out of the house. And so, yeah, my parents, I'm going to suspect that I surprised them when I came along.
I would think so. 10 years after 5 others.
Exactly. And so, but no, I'm the baby of 6, and my father introduced me to the game. But even in my little town of Crawfordville, every Sunday, the grown folks would go play, they call it hardball. They'd have a hardball game at the park. And people would absolutely gather around, sit on the cars, and watch these guys play. And so baseball has always played kind of a role in my life. My town was too small to field a high school baseball team.
Right.
So we had basketball and track. And I just don't believe in running for the sake of running. So if they didn't have a ball involved with it, I didn't want any part of it. So I played basketball, which is what ultimately got me to Kansas City, to then Park College, now Park University. Started off playing a couple of years of small college basketball before I got hurt, and then I stopped and just focused on my studies. But that's what got me to Kansas City. But I've been a baseball fan since I can remember.
What was it like as a teenager in that small town? What was the life like, and what was the life at home like? Your relationship with your parents and such. Because as you said, your siblings were all gone. So.
Yeah. My parents, by the time I came along, I think they were a little tired. So I didn't have the same stringent rules that my other brothers had to adhere to. You know, the rules were whatever I cook, that's what you eat. Well, I had a little say-so in those kinds of things, and she kind of catered to me a little bit more. Now, growing up in a small town has its pros and its cons.
Mm-hmm.
The pros is that you know everybody, and everybody knows you. The con is you know everybody, and everybody knows you.
Right.
And so you couldn't get in any trouble because literally everybody had jurisdiction over you. And so it was funny. I tell the story oftentimes when I came to Park and I started to meet some of the guys, and we would be walking the campus and a car would drive by and I'd wave. And they would look at me like, did you know that person? No, I didn't know him. Well, why are you waving at him? Because that's what you do. I couldn't walk by Miss Jones' house.
Right.
She's sitting on the porch, and I don't acknowledge her. By the time I got home, my mother was like, well, Miss Jones just called and said you walked by the house and didn't open your mouth. And so that's that kind of small town upbringing. Tough on your social life. Yeah, because every girl that I tried to date, my mother said, oh, boy, that's your cousin.
Wow, that would be tough.
That's tough.
Yeah.
But no, man, I look back so fondly on those years of growing up in Crawfordville and just being in a carefree environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, being in a carefree environment, 2 loving parents who gave me everything I needed. Now, I may not have had everything I wanted, but I had everything that I needed. And they were 2 who, growing up in the Deep South themselves at the time in which they did, they could only get a 10th grade education. That's all they could get. That was as far as they could go. But they always understood the value of an education, and they instilled that in all of us about the importance of an education. And they wanted, as I think any family does, they wanted us to be better than them. They wanted us to achieve at a greater level. They wanted us to have more than them. And I think we all want that for our children. Today, sometimes, though, we may be guilty of giving them too much. Right. Yeah, because sometimes I don't know if we gain the kind of appreciation for stuff that we would like for our children, because they kind of take it for granted that this is the way that things are always going to be. People are just going to give me, And so, yeah, but they gave me everything that I absolutely needed. And the person that I've become and hopefully will continue to become is all due to them.
Was basketball the sole reason you ended up coming to this area to go to Park College?
It was. It absolutely was. I chased the basketball from Crawfordville, Georgia to Parkville, Missouri, because from the time that I was 12, Danny, I was going to Howard University. Yeah, 11 to 12 years old. I was going to Washington, D.C. every year to spend the summer with my brother Fred. And so I'm going to Howard University. And in my senior year, I had gotten accepted to go to Howard University. Mm-hmm. And at the 13th hour, I get a scholarship offer from Park College because Howard wanted me to walk on. They didn't have any money for me. And so they wanted me to come to school and walk on. And I was prepared to try and do that. And then at the 13th hour, I get a scholarship offer from Park College, switch gears, and left to come to Parkville, Missouri. Haven't looked back since. I've been in this area ever since 1980.
Do you know the story of how? I mean, you must. How did they find you? I mean, in the middle of Georgia.
I have no idea how they found me in Crawfordville, Georgia. I really don't. And I never visited. I saw the brochures.
Right.
I saw the offer. I signed and kept on coming.
We got a few Kansas City institutions, to say the least, on Kansas City Profiles this time around. And one of those that I visited in the summer, right around his birthday, in fact. That's how I reconnected with Don Fortune, longtime sports anchor, and then on to talk radio in its early stages with KMBZ as well. Retired now down in Florida, but still a great storyteller with great stories to tell. This one about moving from Channel 9 to Channel 5 in the early 1980s.
Well, the change came in 1980, and I was having contract negotiation problems with the Metro Media, and things weren't going very well. And I thought, gee, I don't know what's going to happen to me, but I don't like what they're putting on the table. And so Mike Casserly, who was the news director at Channel 5, had moved to Houston, Texas, to KPRC TV, and he called me one day and says, "How would you like to work in Houston? Come on, I'll fly you down here and you get to see the place and see what you think." And so I went down there, and it seemed pretty nice. It was a really even bigger operation, but I didn't like the general manager. I didn't think much of him. I thought he was kind of putting me down. He, among other things, he said to me, why have you stayed in Kansas City so long? And I said, well, why wouldn't I? Have you ever been there? And he said, no, but if the networks come looking for people, they're not going to look in Kansas City. They're going to look in markets like Houston. And I looked at him and I said, well, they don't know what they're missing. I never took the job. The other thing was, he began to be critical of Harry Truman because he had met Truman once, and Truman was one of my heroes. So that really turned me off too. But in any case, I never took the job in Houston. And then shortly after I got back, I got a call from Phil Jones, and he said, "You're going to be a free agent here soon. I'd like to talk to you." Phil Jones was general manager of Channel 5, and so he offered me a job, and I took it, except that I had to stay off television for 3 months because I had a non-compete clause for 90 days to be on TV. But I could do radio, and so I started their sports talk show on what was then KCMO radio. We called it Sportsline, and that was the first time I'd ever done that. And I don't know, I ended up being the sports anchor. I worked with Jack, and Jack would do the early news, and I would do the late news, and Gene Fox and Leif Lysick were all part of the team. We had a pretty darn good sports operation at Channel 5 in those days. So those were three very talented people that I got to work with. And I loved every minute of it.
When at that time, you're not doing like 2 minutes like they do these days. How much time was reserved for sports in the 70s and 80s?
About 3.5 to 4 minutes, but Don would sometimes run over. Get in trouble for it. And I had many a producer screaming in my ear, "Get off! We're dumping the last story. Get off!" But yeah, it was a good operation, and that was we had just gone from film. Remember when I started in television at Channel 9? We were shooting black and white film, negative, and then we would just reverse the polarity on camera, so that it was actually negative film. We never printed it. We didn't have the facilities to do that. And so the finished copy looked fine on television, but we shot it in film. And then we got color processors, and I worked with some great cameramen like Marshall Brown. I think Marshall Brown is a great photographer, and we were color processors, and the whole business changed then. But then along came satellites after that. But I started in film, in black and white film, and then we went to color, and it went on from there. I saw a great change. I went from, and that today I probably couldn't even work in a television station today. It's so different.
And it was a different time as well as far as the relationships with the athletes and things like that. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it was a different time. I think we had a much better relationship with the athletes because the salary disparity wasn't nearly as big as it is today. And as a result, I made some really close friendships over the years. I mean, Roger Nelson was the very first Royal. He was a pitcher that we drafted out of the Orioles organization, got to know Roger very well. And then there was Paul Splittorff, and of course, George Brett always got along great with George, and Cookie Rojas, and there was just a bunch of guys that I got to know so very, very well. And even in football, Bobby Bell and Len and Willie Lanier. I remember when we were in New Orleans for Super Bowl IV, and the players were on the floor above where I was staying, and Len had called me on the phone. He said, "Come on up, meet the guys. We got a lot of time to kill before we have to go to the stadium." I said, "Okay." And Willie Lanier picked me up and held me out over the window. He could have dropped me in the street. He thought it was pretty funny. I was terrified. Willie was a great guy. So we had a totally different relationship with players then, Dan, than you have today.
When eventually radio and sports talk would become, but by the way, I've been remiss here. Everybody did it, so maybe and my dad did it too, so maybe that's why the question didn't pop into my head right away. Obviously, you are Don Fortunato. What was the process of being Don Fortune?
That was a nickname. It started in high school, actually. Guys would call me Forge or Fortune, and it kind of stuck. And then when I was at Fordham, I decided I would just use that name on the air, at the radio station, because it was a nickname there too. And there was a couple other guys in the school who also went there from Canisius High School to Fordham. So they were still calling me that, and it just stuck. I never changed it. I never changed my name legally.
Another person who brought you great sports information over the years was Tom Keegan from the Lawrence Journal-World. He moved on to Boston a couple of years ago and now is trying to fight off the effects of COVID, as a matter of fact, as this year ends, and exploring new opportunities in 2021. But he's worked everywhere from Chicago to California to, as he explains here, New York City, covering baseball in the Big Apple and trying to get on that back page of the New York tabloids as he worked for the New York Post.
I really was quite aggressive and got the back page a lot. It was intense. It was very intense, but it was fun. It was very much an adrenaline boosting type situation. And New York newspapers are the best. The famous old story is when the Pope made a visit for the first time. I don't know if it was ever or in a long, long time. Made a visit to New York, and the New York Times headline was something along the lines of Pontiff makes historic visit to city. And the Daily News was Viva il Papa. and the New York Post, now after I tell you the New York Post headline, you tell me which paper you're going to buy if you only have enough quarters to buy one of them. The New York Post headline was Crazed man stalks Pope.
I guess the Post would get my quarters at that point in time.
Yes. I guarantee you how that went down. The cop writer calls, anything going on with security with the Pope? Nah, nothing. Everything's cool. Nothing wrong. Nah. You telling me there's not a single, Crazy Louie called and threatened, but, he calls every day with something. Okay, I got my story.
From that standpoint, what were the guys you were covering in your days with New York? The players, the managers, who was a tough guy, who was a good guy, who was a go-to guy?
Yeah, good question. I covered the first 6 years I was there. I covered 4 Yankee World Championships in 5 years and did the Mets. So Joe Torre was Buck Showalter was the first manager. And, it's funny, as a baseball writer, you find out pretty quickly whether you're a good mix with the manager. And it's either you're going to be a good mix or it's oil and water. And the late Johnny and Oates, oil and water. Buck Showalter, oil and water. Joe Torre was fine. I did the Mets Dallas Green. I caught just a little of him and a lot of Bobby Valentine. I got along well with Bobby, pretty much. There were some ups and downs, but I found him interesting. And then Mike Piazza was a guy who came to the Mets while I was there, which was fortunate for me because I had known Mike, had met him when he was in high school because I was covering the Dodgers, and one of Tommy Lasorda's best friends is Vince Piazza, and I knew Vince well, and was actually on the road with the Dodgers the day that they gave Mike, after they drafted Mike, and gave him a workout in Houston, and so I loved having Piazza come there. I like him. He's a good guy. He doesn't give you the cliches. He's not enough of a sports nut, I don't think, to give you the cliches. Sometimes that's like Christian Ballard in Lawrence Free State was always a good interview because he wasn't like a sports nut. He was a really well-versed guy. He was an artist. Those are guys who tend to be more interesting interviews. But, I covered Jeter as when he came up from AAA for 2 weeks when Tony Fernandez was injured. And then the next year, his rookie year, when on opening day it snowed at Yankee Stadium. And I remember people saying how ridiculous it was that in 97, I think it was, Johnny Oates had said, look at this team and think about how good they are, yet is there a single player on this team who will make the Hall of Fame? And that was before Mariano Rivera really took off. So I wrote a column. I have a prediction. Jeter will be a Hall of Famer. People are like, wow. Oh, you're ridiculous. But you could just tell, man, he was smarter than the baseball. You never had to talk to him about why did you go for the extra base in that situation, or why didn't you? Because he instinctively did the right thing. You never have to ask him, was that a bad hop? Because he never screwed up grounders. You know, why did you throw this base? You never had to ask him anything like that. He was just a baseball machine with a perfect baseball mentality. Just, you know, you couldn't tell whether he was having a great week or a bad week. He was just the same guy every day. Same boring guy every day.
Yeah, except when he was leaving fruit baskets for the ladies, I guess, when that happened.
Yes.
Yeah. But so you also, during your time in New York, entered the sordid world of talk radio for 3 solid years at WFAN, only to be replaced by Stephen A. Smith. But what were those 3 years like, and what was that? Was that enjoyable for you?
It was actually ESPN Radio.
Oh, okay.
1050 ESPN Radio in New York. It was, you know, I find it a lot easier to be a guest. But no, I think if I did it again, I'd do it a lot better. I was just too nervous that, you know, about ratings and stuff and thinking you're going to get fired the next day. So it was somewhat interesting. We did some interesting things. But I think writing is probably more my natural thing. But if I did it again, I know I'd be a lot more relaxed and do a better job of it.
So you work in all these big markets, and you're covering the iconic franchises and things like that. And not that what we're going to get to is sort of an iconic franchise of its own. But what was the route to Lawrence, Kansas like after you had been a big city sports writer for all those years?
Well, you know, it was interesting. A guy named Matt McCall, who has since died, was a great guy. He and I were the same age, and we covered the Dodgers together. And I lived in Norwalk, Connecticut when I worked in New York. And so when I didn't remember this, but Matt was from Norwalk, so he came in to see his mother, and he gave me a call and said, "You want to have lunch?" I said, "Yeah, meet me at the golf course at noon. They have a nice new restaurant there, and I'm teeing off at 1 o'clock, so we'll have lunch there." And I told him that I just lost the radio gig, and he goes, "You're kidding. I was called by a headhunter about a job you'd be perfect for, and you're the only New York sports writer I can think of who would enjoy that job because you really like college sports, and you like writing a column, and you're good at it, and I got the guy's number, but you better hurry because they're going to make a quick decision." I didn't hurry enough to cancel my golf round, but I did get my stuff together that night and called the next day. And then the day after that, they brought me in for an interview. So, and that was, you know, it was the same sort of intensity job-wise because, face it, I mean, where do you get a more intense concentration of fans for one team than for KU basketball? I mean, maybe Lexington, Kentucky's the same, certainly Alabama football. But in New York, you know, you had a few fans who liked them both, but usually it's Mets or Yankees. So the job itself wasn't that different, believe it or not. And the ownership at the time paid really well. The Simons family, and they were very provided great resources to the sports section. So we had a big time sports section, and it was a lot of fun doing that job.
We've got a few more stories just ahead here on Kansas City Profiles from Tony Severino, Chris Ketz, and Duron Sherry, and they have interesting tales to tell as we continue with this greatest hits, as it were, package to start off 2021 on Kansas City Profiles.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
It's time to visit once again with Dr. Brad Woodle of Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. And Dr. Brad, your group has reached a significant milestone in receiving a prestigious award.
Danny, we've been honored for the 10th year in a row to receive the 5-Star Service Award from Integrity Doctors. And what this means is that all of our offices throughout Kansas City have made sure to give people excellent chiropractic and acupuncture care, be on time, and do a very complete and thorough job, and have great responses back from patients.
I know firsthand because I was just treated, for instance, today by you. You have a wide range of fantastic services.
Absolutely. Chiropractic, acupuncture, physiotherapies, rehab, anything that you need to keep you well in bones, muscles, joints, and nerves.
And I can't say how much it's benefited me in the time I've coming here, upwards of 2 years. My back has improved 100%. And you can have that same kind of treatment too. For more information and your chance for a healthier way of life, visit asfca.com/Danny today.
Hi, everybody. This is Matt Llewellyn from 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. I just want to thank everybody for supporting local restaurants during this time of uncertainty. 23rd Street Brewery is now open until this pandemic is over. And right now, more than anything, local restaurants need your help and support. Come on out and see us. 23rd Street Brewery is open now from 11:30 till 9 o'clock for dine-in and carry-out. Whatever we can do to help you out, maybe with your catering needs, too. I appreciate all the support, and thank you for continuing to shop local.
I'm here with Tim Emerson, the owner of Emerson & Company. And Tim, give us an idea of the range of services that you provide from Emerson & Company.
At Emerson & Company, we do credit card processing, payroll services. We do bookkeeping, merchant accounts like point-of-sale systems.
What would you say differentiates you from other companies in the field, and what makes you special?
I think what makes us unique is that we're a small local business making regional decisions on companies. We create a profile for the business and then put it out to our different vendors in a very competitive environment and tailor those needs to the specific business, which usually ends up in a great fit or great result for the company.
And, of course, the idea is to save money, right?
Save money, and actually sometimes I'm surprised where actually a solution that may cost a little bit more ultimately does save money, but we're not conditioned to think like that sometimes.
Emerson & Company. Check them out at emerson-co.com or call them at 816-360-9092. Most of us have experienced auto accidents, and it's no fun. And even less fun is trying to work on the insurance aspects afterwards and getting full value after an auto accident. I'm here with David Cowan from recexpert.com. And David, you have an unusual and important niche for people after an auto accident.
We have a passion to teach car wreck clients what they deserve. Getting your car repaired only fixes the damage and the paint. Getting paid for your car's loss in value is called diminished value. Chances are you've never heard of this before because most people aren't looking out for you. We help people collect thousands to tens of thousands of dollars for their car's loss in value after the wreck.
And if somebody wants to come to you for that, what's the original assessment cost them?
We offer a free review of any insurance claim to see how we can help.
You can't beat that. Great expertise and assistance in getting full value after an auto accident from David Cowan. Visit recexpert.com and learn more. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Welcome back, and just retired a couple of years ago as a longtime football institution in Kansas City. Institution's a word you're going to hear a lot here in this Kansas City profile. Tony Severino, who won a state title at Shawnee Mission Northwest and then moved on to what people know him much more for, his lengthy tenure at Rockhurst and all those state championships and all the players he molded and the young men that he led into the football field and the football battles, but just as proud of how they turned out as young men as well. And here he spins the tale of moving from Shawnee Mission Northwest on to Rockhurst.
I called Al Davis at Rockhurst to schedule a game as soon as I took over that job at Northwest. And I don't think Al ever forgot that because I said, Coach, I want to build this program up, be as good as Rockhurst. And I want to play you whenever you get an opening. I never shied away from anybody. And that's how it all began. And then in 1981, we won the state championship at Northwest, and we're there for 3 years in a row in the state finals. And Jerry Culver, I say he resigns. And I'll never forget, Harold Wamscon's calling me at 7:30 in the morning. And he said, Tony, you're going to apply for that job, aren't you? I go, if they want me, I'm going. And I called Al Davis that day. And I said, Coach, he said, Tony, I've been waiting on your call. I said, Coach, I just saw in the paper this morning. And he said, be over here at 3:30 in the afternoon. And I'm going to tell you my interview. He said, you be over here at 3:30 in the afternoon, and Mike Van Kiersblik meets me at the door. I always tell Mike he's the first guy I ever met at Rockhurst. He takes me to Coach Davis's office. Coach Davis grabs my arm, takes me up to Father Hunhausen, walks me in the office, and he said, "Father, this is our new football coach. Do whatever you have to do to hire him," and he leaves. How many people get interviewed like that anymore?
Not many.
That was every now you got to go in front of boards. You got to go, you got to go through hoops. And they check in your. But that literally was my interview with Al. Like I said, I played against Rockhurst, and he knew me and knew my background. But that was he just grabbed my arm. We didn't even talk for 10 minutes. I said, "Coach, there's about 3 things I'd like to have before I come over here." But you had to know Al Davis. You didn't. Not too many people were able to say no to Al.
So you had success early, and you won a state championship already as you're going to Rockhurst. How did you develop what would be your football philosophy?
Well, a lot of it has to do with you take the best and the worst of all the coaches you played for, all the people you've met, all the people you listen to, and then as you play them, you take philosophies. Yeah, I really like that scheme. I like what he did there, and Vince Gibson was a great organizer. I didn't think he was the greatest everyday coach. Game coach. Certain guys are great game coaches. Certain guys are great practice coaches. Certain guys are great organizers. I read a lot of books. The guys, John Wooden, I admired the things he had to say about coaching. Mike Krzyzewski, you listen to him talk about basketball coaches. I read tons of, Lou Holtz, different books and people you've met. I tell people, the people that I have been so fortunate to have in my office, the Lou Holtz and the Barry Switzers and the Joe Paternos and you name them. And I think one of the greatest was that I got to drive with John Wooden, sit in the back seat of a limo. I was supposed to pick him up at the airport. He was going to talk at a clinic here, and I missed him coming. He didn't. He got off the plane early, and we ended up the limo driver. I had the driver. We got off at the same time he did at the hotel, and I went up to him and said, "Coach Wooden, I am so sorry." I said, "You got off early." And so I was part of a speech that night. Well, the great thing was about a year later, I'm speaking at a clinic in St. Louis, and John Wooden's on the clinic because he's the main speaker. I'm supposed to speak at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. John was the keynote guy at 9. His secretary calls me up in my hotel room, and he said, "Coach Wood like to trade spots with you because he's got to get back on a plane and get back to UCLA, to get back to California." And I go, there's going to be a lot of disappointed people when Tony Severino walks in and John Wood's not there. Well, John, I said, I'll be honored, but, so I take it, I walk out there, there's like 500 people. I think John talked about 9 who were there to hear me.
That's funny. But you had consistent success. You had one losing team at Rockhurst, and also your championship teams were kind of spaced out as well. So you were always excelling. As you went along, did you find it difficult to, you set a standard like that? I mean, that's difficult to live up to.
Well, my philosophy had always been you play the best. I think one year we traveled over 4 or 5 times. We played out in Vegas. We went to Chicago. We went to, I started naming all the different places that the teams we played, and I always looked to play the best. And I always used to tell the kids, if you don't play the best, you're never going to be, I said, don't get me wrong. I said, there's probably 5 or 6 schools like Rockhurst in the state of Missouri and around Kansas City. I said, this is a big country, and there's a lot of great football players and a lot of great programs around the country, and who are you going to compare yourself to? And you would have kids, well, Coach, I think I could get to college. No, look, and I can recruit a 6'2". I was always honest with the kids, but I said, doesn't mean you can't play against them. Doesn't mean you can't compete with them, you know. So we always looked to play the best, and I always thought it really paid dividends when we got into playoff time.
Someone who's had just about as long a tenure as Tony Severino had, but he's in television, and that's Chris Ketz, longtime anchor at Channel 9. We have something very much in common. We are sons of broadcasters, and really that was what paved the way for Chris Ketz, as he really never even thought of anything else as far as what he was going to do. Not a teacher, not an athlete. Nope, he just wanted to broadcast.
This is all I have really wanted to do. From the earliest age that I can remember, this is what I wanted to do. And maybe it was because I admired my father so much and admired the way that he went about his work. There are a lot of things today that I do that I'll be the first one to admit. I've ripped off so much stuff from my dad. I've lost count. And, but like I say, I liked what he did. I liked what I saw, and I knew that that's where I wanted to be. And that, just to fast forward to today for just a moment, I just marked 37 years here at KMBC, and I've been in daily journalism now about 42. And I still pinch myself over the fact that I'm doing what I'm doing at a place that I'm at. This was a lifelong dream that came true a long time ago, and I am one of those who is still thankful every single day that I'm doing what I'm doing. And you know, my problem is it's still a hell of a lot of fun to go to work. So.
What
not a bad place to be.
No, not at all. What did you admire in particular about your dad's professional work?
You know, my dad, a lot of things. One thing in particular is that I always admired and wanted to be as good a writer as he was. He wrote everything that he said on television, and I do the same thing today. And we have wonderful producers here at KMBC, don't get me wrong. But I think there are a lot of younger people, especially breaking into the business, where they might use 20 words to say what you can say in 6. And so my dad was very, I think, economical with words, and I am too to this day. And I know that words mattered a lot to him, and they do to me. So that was one thing. He was he didn't he didn't suffer fools very well. I can tell you that. But he was just a very no nonsense, serious guy, but not someone who took himself seriously. I mean, there were an awful lot of times on the air where things would happen, and you know, his smile was something that I'll never forget. I have so many photographs of him from back in the day on my phone, and every once in a while I'll start scrolling through camera roll on my iPhone and reliving some of those memories. So there was that at work, and he was also someone who really liked where he was. He had a great connection to the Quad Cities, especially in a charitable way. For many, many years, he was the local host of what was then the Jerry Lewis Muscular Dystrophy Telethon. And for people who are our age, Danny, they certainly remember what that was and what a significant time of the year, television-wise, that was such a big deal because it was, 24, 25 hours, whatever it was, and the biggest stars of the world all on one stage, and everybody was watching. So he handled the local part of that, and so our family got involved in the Muscular Dystrophy Association up in the Quad Cities on a lot of different levels, But to my dad, it wasn't just doing the telethon. There were things throughout the year that he was involved with MDA, and he got very close to an awful lot of clients up there, people who obviously whose lives ended far too soon. But he had such a deep and credible connection that he made with the audience, and he did it through hard work, and he did it the right way, and I can only hope that I've been half as successful as he was in his career doing that.
He obviously stayed at WQAD-TV for a long, long time. Do you know, maybe he didn't tell you, I don't know, did he ever have opportunities to move on?
Yeah, he sure did. Yeah, he did. I remember one time in particular where I thought, and I was just a kid at the time, I thought, we might be moving to San Francisco. And but for whatever reason, it didn't happen. But I think my dad was also, I think because he was born and raised in Chicago, I think if Chicago came calling, I think we probably would have made that move. But I think Northern California was probably more than he wanted to bite off and chew, especially at the time with 3 young children. But the Quad Cities, as I say, it was a terrific place to grow up in, and at a wonderful time, and a pretty good situation there for an awfully long time. And now my oldest son, Jonathan, who is, as I say, he anchors mornings there. It's his first job out of Mizzou, and Jonathan has been there now. I think it's going on 7 years. And but my son's first job in the business, he walks into a building where the street in front of the station and the studio are named after his grandfather. So there's no pressure there whatsoever.
Absolutely. Your first job, at least according to what I'm looking at right here, is the weekend news anchor for a radio station in Moline. How did that come about? I imagine that certainly your dad's name or whatever that helped out, but you had to have the goods, right?
Well, it all started, Danny, at a 1,000-watt radio station in Moline, Illinois. Yeah, that no longer exists. Yeah, I mean, the fact that I was Jim King's son opened up an awful lot of doors that wouldn't have opened up if I hadn't had that connection. And I'm absolutely the first one to admit that, and have for years. And I think I don't think there's any question that helped. I was a senior in high school when the news director at the time, who just passed away not too very long ago, a guy named Mark Minnick, and again, it was reading weekend news on that radio station, and just reading weekend news was essentially there wasn't a whole lot of writing to be done. You had teletypes at the time, and there was a lot of ripping and reading to do, and just something to fill 5 minutes worth of time at the top and the bottom of the hour. But it was a wonderful place to learn about a business that I knew I wanted to make a career in. This radio station, WQUA, when I got there in April of 1977, they had just won a National Headliners Award. And so this was a 6-person full-time newsroom in a community of that size, which today is absolutely unheard of. But it was a really good place to learn, and that's what I was doing. And I was working at that radio station, and I was going to school at the same time across the river in Davenport at St. Ambrose University, where I studied. My degree's in mass communications, but I ended up because of my experience at the radio station, I ended up with a wonderful advisor. I ended up signing out of a lot of classes, and so I basically studied business and political science. But as I say, it was just a great place to learn of the business from people who were really good at what they were doing, and you'll hear me say this again, but walking into that newsroom, having been around newsrooms my whole life, they weren't intimidating places for me, but they were also places that I treated with a lot of respect. And so I knew, even at that age, 18 years old, still in high school, that I was in probably I was in wherever my head. But I will give myself credit for this. I at least knew, I was smart enough to realize that if I'd kept my mouth shut and just watched how these people work, I might learn something. And as I say, you'll hear me tell that story again a little later in this conversation. But as I say, it was a terrific place for a first job. It was just the best.
And finally, let's visit with Duron Cherry, who, by the way, was a great baseball player and a great football player in college at Rutgers, but he was most known as a great punter, an all-conference punter. But, of course, that's not where he would end up playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. And here he tells us how that came about.
The handwriting's on the wall. They're going to bring me into camp, and then they're just going to cut me, based on, my performance in minicamp of having to change my whole putting style. And so I called Marv Levy and said, hey, I know my punting wasn't what it should have been, but Coach Gantz has had me, start all over again. It's like learning how to walk again, when you change your style that you've been doing your whole entire life. And I said, well, I can also play quarterback and I can play safety. I can play cornerback. I said, there's 4 or 5 positions I can play. Just give me an opportunity. And he said, okay, hold on, I'll give you a call back. And about 30 minutes later, he calls me back and says, okay, we'll bring you in early and you can work out at the safety position. And I had looked at those safeties during the minicamp and realized that, these guys they drafted were, they were making mistakes every day. And I'm looking at them going, man, I'm just as good as those guys. Just give me an opportunity to prove myself. So when I came back, I just was solely playing safety position and learning that. I was doing punting too, but not as much. And I was just, learning the safety position and wind up making it to being like the last player cut. I thought I had made the team because usually a team keeps 7 defensive backs. And in this case, they were only keeping 6 for the opening game, and I was so disappointed. I went up to Les Miller. He was our pro personnel director at the time, and, he called me into his office. I'm dressed to go to practice, and it's the first week of the first practice of the regular season, and they were playing the Pittsburgh Steelers that year. And shoot, I was going to be able to go back to Pittsburgh, and my family was going to be able to come up and see me play. And I go to Les Miller, and he says, "Hey, man, we gotta let you go because we drafted 2 tight ends. You remember Willie Scott and then Marvin Harvey, and one of them was the 1st round pick, the other one was the 3rd round pick, and they weren't ready to play, so they had to wind up keeping 4 tight ends, which no team did at that time. But the Chiefs wind up keeping 4 tight ends because Al Dixon was the starter, and then Ed Beckman was the special teams captain. And so they kept 4, and they only kept 6 defensive backs for the first game of the season. They could probably get away with it at that time, because there wasn't that much of a specialty position. Now most teams were, 2 wide receivers and a tight end, so they were basic. So you use 4 defensive backs, and they figured they had 2 of them that could be reserves, a corner, and then another safety. So I got, they said, hey, we're sorry, but we're going to have to send you home. So I was the last player cut. I was in my uniform, ready to go out to practice, and thinking that I had made the team. I had guys coming up congratulating me like Gary Green and Eric Harris and Gary Barber, all the guys in the secondary, and that would have put me and Lloyd, 2 guys that year, that came in the same year. We would have been the only 2, the 2 rookies that would have made the team. And I got cut. So I was not happy, but I was, I knew I could play. I had proven to them that I could play, and they just said, hey, go home, stay in shape, you never know when we might call you back. So that's what happened.
Well, they called you back pretty soon, didn't they?
Absolutely. I mean, I was home that weekend, and I had left as soon as I got home. I went and saw my mom, and then I left and drove up to Newark, New Jersey, East Orange. That's where my college roommate lived, and I went up and spent the weekend with him and his family, and just was kind of relaxing and kind of, just enjoying the weekend. And then Sunday night, my mom calls me and says, "Hey, Kansas City called. They got a ticket for you to fly out to Kansas City at the Philadelphia airport. One of the players got hurt, and they need you out there." So I drive home, get packing my stuff, and get on a plane, head to Kansas City on Monday, get into Kansas City about 5:30, drive straight to the stadium, go into the general manager's office, Jim Schauf, and he looks at me and says, "Hey, the player wasn't as hurt as bad as we thought he was, so we're not going to be able to sign you, but you can stay here." But Gary Green was nice enough to, he had a 2-bedroom apartment and had an extra room. So he said, "Hey, you can stay with me, and you can use my car. You just drive me, drop me off at practice, and then pick me up. But you can use my car." And then, basically I just worked out during the day and did what I could. And then I was there that first week, and then the second week the Chiefs called me back in and said, "Hey, if nobody gets hurt, we're going to have to send you home." And that next week, I think it was Frank Maliuna got hurt, and Art Still got hurt, and then they wound up signing me.
6 great stories for you, and just an example of what we do on Kansas City Profiles, and we'll continue to do it in 2021 with fascinating looks at people you are familiar with and some fascinating stories as well. Mostly, we talk one-on-one with esteemed Kansas Cityans or people from across the country who have connections to Kansas City, but we also weave in some stories about downtown baseball, things like that as well, and we will continue to do so in 2021. Looking forward to it, and let's hope for much, much better as we turn to the new year.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.